In 2019, Prince Andrew sat down for what became one of the most talked about interviews in modern history, not because of what he admitted, but because of what didn't make sense. Today, I'm going to show you from a behavioural and statement analysis perspective where his answers appear contradictory, unreliable, or linguistically distancing. Watch closely. This is not about determining guilt or innocence. This is about analysing communication. And once you see these signs, you won't be able to unsee them. Let's start with one of the most discussed parts of the interview. The Pizza Express alibi. Prince Andrew stated that he could not have been at a London nightclub on the night in question because, in his words, I was at Pizza Express in Woking with my daughter. Now here's what's interesting. When people tell the truth about ordinary events, they usually give natural memory-based recall. It sounds relaxed, unstructured, unrehearsed, but when someone is constructing an alibi, they often anchor heavily to a single specific detail. Notice how the Pizza Express story is repeated and reinforced. Pizza Express, Woking, with my daughter. Almost as if the credibility of the entire account rests on that one memory. In behavioural analysis, we call this alibi anchoring. Instead of broad natural recall like I think we went out somewhere that night, we get a highly specific and structured narrative. Over-specificity can sometimes indicate a prepared account, rather than a spontaneous memory. It doesn't prove deception, but it certainly raises questions. Now, let's move to another moment that drew global attention. The claim, "I don't sweat." He explained this by saying he had a medical condition following the Falklands War. From a statement analysis perspective, this is extremely interesting. When someone offers an unusual or unlikely explanation, they often attempt to over-justify it. Rather than simply denying the allegation, an additional medical narrative is introduced to explain away a specific accusation. We call this defensive overcompensation. When a person provides highly detailed justifications, medical explanations, or improbable physical claims, it can signal an attempt to preempt disbelief. In simple terms, the more someone tries to convince you, the more carefully you should examine what they're saying. But perhaps the most revealing element of the interview wasn't what he denied. It was what he didn't express. When discussing the alleged victim, there was very little spontaneous empathy language. Now this is critical. In high-stakes interviews, truthful individuals who are innocent will usually express natural concern for anyone claiming harm, even if the allegation is false. You often hear phrases like, "I feel terrible for anyone who believes they were hurt. I would never want anyone to suffer." That type of language was largely absent. Instead, the responses were formal, structured, and emotionally detached. This is known as emotional distancing. On its own, it proves nothing. But when combined with contradictions, defensive explanations, and selective memory, it becomes behaviourally significant. Which brings me to the final point, selective memory. Throughout the interview, Prince Andrew demonstrated very clear recall of certain events. Yet when it came to key allegations, his memory became less certain. This inconsistency matters. When memory is extremely sharp for alibi details, but vague around critical accusations, investigators call this strategic recall. Truthful memory is usually messy but consistent. Constructed memory is often selective and protective. Now, let me be very clear. Behavioural analysis does not determine guilt or innocence, but it does reveal when communication is inconsistent, rehearsed, or strategically structured. The Prince Andrew interview will be studied for decades as one of the most extraordinary examples of high-stakes communication under pressure. If you want to learn how to detect deception in everyday life, in business, in relationships, and in the media, subscribe to this channel. I'm Steve Van Apren, the human lie detector, and I'll teach you how to see what others miss.